Abilities are what make Valorant unique. They can be the difference between being an okay player or a great player, and there's always something you could do to get more use out of these abilities. Simply knowing all the different ways you can use each agent's abilities can put you miles ahead of the competition and hopefully give your team the edge in those close games. So today I'm breaking down 10 abilities that most players are using wrong so that you can fix these mistakes and become a better player. To kick us off, we're going to be taking a look at Sova, specifically his Recon Bolt. There are really three main things that we need to be aware of when using the Recon Bolt. First is the dart scanning everywhere it needs to. Second is the dart easy to shoot out. And finally, are your darts varied? That's quite a bit of info, so let's break it down. The first way I see this ability used incorrectly is the positioning of the dart. Tons of players will shoot their darts just onto sight. Instead of doing this, you need to be sure to shoot your Recon Bolt so that it lands high up. For instance, on bind B site, some players would go ahead and shoot an arrow out of main to scan some of these angles. This is absolutely a mistake though. A much more effective way to use this ability is to shoot it high up on this wall so that it can scan much more of the area. This shot positioning fixes our second issue as well, darts being easy to shoot out. When a dart is high up on a wall, it forces enemies to move their crosshairs all the way up to the sky to shoot it out. This takes them way more time, which gives you a chance to push the enemy. And finally, you need to be sure to vary your darts. This simply means change up what darts you are shooting as often as possible. No matter how advanced your darts are, they will instantly get broken if they are the same ones every time. The other team will start to predict this, and you will be useless to your team. So be sure to always vary what dart you are sending so that you can guarantee your team some info. Next up, let's talk about Phoenix. He has some pretty simple abilities, but when used correctly, can have some major impact. For instance, Phoenix's wall is a very strong ability that has a lot of versatility. Not only can it be used similarly to an on-the-go Viper wall to block lines of sight, but it can also be used to heal yourself in a pinch if you take damage. However, most people only really use it for heals or to get out of a sticky situation. While healing yourself is very helpful in a lot of situations, as a Phoenix, your job isn't always to heal yourself constantly and just stay alive. You want to focus on making space for your team to get onto a site. You can use it to help you clear a site by splitting the site in half, decreasing the number of angles you expose yourself to at the same time. This can help you safely clear certain angles without worrying about getting shot in the back from an enemy holding a cheeky angle. Not only that, but Blaze also has great synergy with Phoenix's flash. One problem with Phoenix's flash is that it's thrown in the open, meaning you have to be standing near a wall a lot of the time to avoid flashing yourself without messing up your crosshair placement. Phoenix's wall lets you get around that by allowing you to throw your flash through it and then peek out of it, blinding anyone on the other side while also avoiding getting flashed yourself. There are so many great ways to use Phoenix's firewall besides just for healing, and if you play Phoenix, you should try out some of the ways I've mentioned to see for yourself. Moving on, let's talk about another initiator agent, specifically Skye. Skye has her guiding light flashbang that I see being used incorrectly non-stop. Most players will just toss the flash out and pop it so that they can blind the enemy team. This sounds great at a base level, but it can be utilized way better. There's a couple strats you can use here to make this flash even more useful. First, you can completely fake the flash. To do this, flash like you normally would, but don't actually pop the flash. Instead, peek the enemies as the bird still flies. If you vary normal flashes with this fake flash, you can pick up some easy kills as the enemies will try to look away from the flash. As they look away from the flash, you'll be peeking and get these free kills. Remember, this isn't perfect for every situation, but can be a great way to vary your normal flashes. Another way to use the guiding light a bit more effectively is to pop flash. This is pretty simple and will almost guarantee a kill every time. Stand on a corner and throw a flash right around it. Pop this immediately and peek with it. With the recent Skye nerfs, this won't be as strong, but you can still pull this off for an easy frag. And if you're looking for a more in-depth guide on how to play any agents, why not check out SkillCapped.com? The website has guides for every single agent in the game made by Immortal and Radiant level players who are all dedicated to helping you improve your agent mastery. The website is also backed by a rank improvement guarantee, so there's no risk at all when signing up. So if you're looking to improve quickly at your favorite agent, click the link in the description to check out the website. Now let's get back into the video. On to the fourth ability that most players are using wrong, we have Killjoy's Lockdown. Killjoy's Lockdown is a very powerful ultimate that forces players to either run away or counter quickly. The thing with Killjoy's ult is it's hard to fully use it wrong. It seems like all you have to do is put it behind a wall and then you should be good to go. It can pretty much clear an entire site all on its own if used correctly, and using it suboptimally could cost you a round that you otherwise should have won. The most important thing to think about when using the ultimate is what ability counters does the enemy team have. Paying attention to things like what ultimates are available or what sites certain agents are playing on can be a huge difference maker. For example, if you know the enemy team has a Sova or Brim, you might want to bait out their ultimates before you use your lockdown since those are big counters. On the other hand though, you can actually use your lockdown to specifically bait out the other team's ult. Also, if an enemy team has too many counters to the ult, it's sometimes better to fake a site with it and then have your team push the opposite site after you put it down, since at that point most players rotate right away after seeing it. Killjoy's Lockdown is a very powerful ultimate, but it's important to always be aware of what's going on in your game so that you're able to get the most out of it in your specific situation. We're now halfway through the list, and we have Raze's Paint Shells. Raze's grenade is very strong, capable of getting a lot of chip damage and even sometimes confirming kills all on its own. And it's also one that I see a lot of players using incorrectly. Too many players just throw it out without much thought, and while that can do damage, it actually has some better uses. One of the best ways to use Raze's Paint Shells is to throw them where you know an enemy is because of a teammate's util, like a Sova dart or a Skye dog, then swing with the grenade. This puts them in a lose-lose situation where whether or not they're able to kill you, they're going to die to the nade. This is a great way to guarantee a kill with this powerful ability pretty much every single round. Not only is it good for confirming kills, but it's also just great for denying the enemy team space. For example, if your team is pushing mid to B on split, throwing your nade in ropes can stop an enemy from pushing out and killing you and your team from the back while you take heaven. There's just so much value being left on the table by so many Raze players, and just learning how to play off your nade better could help you win so many more rounds. Next up, we're going to talk about Brimstone, and more specifically, his ultimate. Brimstone has an extremely strong ult with his Orbital Strike, but many people are actually using this extremely powerful ability incorrectly. It is really easy to wait until you know exactly where an enemy is, and then use the ability to kill them. That is how most players look at using their ultimate, but this is actually leaving a ton on the table. One of the more powerful ways to use the ult is to buy time. The Orbital Strike lasts almost 4 seconds, and when used correctly, can delay an enemy push for upwards of 8 or even 10 seconds. An easy way to show this is bind B site. Let's say the enemy team starts to show some presence on this site and you're holding it. As the enemies push, you can use the ultimate in hookah. The goal of this isn't to kill the enemy team, but instead to force them out of hookah and delay their push. This does a couple things. First, it gives your teammates time to rotate if needed. Next, it messes up the enemy team's timing on their push. While the B-long players use their util and push up, they won't have the support from the hookah players. The seventh ability that most players are using incorrectly in Valorant is Astra's Gravity Well. Astra can be super hard to start learning and even harder to master. If you can put in the time to learn how to use these abilities correctly, you will definitely see results. Gravity Well is one of the most powerful abilities in the game, providing CC as well as making enemies vulnerable at the end of its duration. It's also very strong as a post-plant tool to stall enemies that are trying to defuse the bomb. Another aspect to think about is combining it with other agents' abilities like a Raze Grenade, but it's also one of the abilities that I see players using incorrectly the most often. On post-plants, I've seen way too many Astras put their star directly on the bomb and then try to use their Gravity Well. The thing with this ability is that it pulls players to the center of the well, so if you want to pull a player off the bomb, you need to put your star a little to the side to ensure that they will be pulled off. A lot of Astros also don't really communicate with their team about how they plan to use their stars in order to combo with their team. If you have an agent like Killjoy on your team, just asking them where they plan to put down their mollies and then putting a star down on them can guarantee you a lot of extra free damage. When playing Astra, you also need to make sure you're using your map as well, because especially in solo queue, you won't always have teammates with mics all the time. So sometimes you'll have to use other indicators from your map to know when it's the best time to activate your Gravity Well. Omen Shadow Step is the next ability that we need to take a look at. Omen has slowly crept his way back into the meta, making him a super strong agent currently. On top of that, Omen is still one of the easier controllers to pick up, so a lot of players that need to fill on the role end up picking him up since Astra is more difficult to play. When it comes to Omen, probably the most misused ability in his entire kit is his Shadow Step. All the time I see Omen players buy their Shadow Step ability and then ignore it for basically the entire game. And when they do this, it's often not in the most ideal way. Contrary to popular belief, Shadow Step is actually a very strong ability. A lot of people know by now that it can be combined with his paranoia to make crazy plays, but the ability to reposition on the fly is strong on its own. It allows you to place certain off angles on top of boxes that agents like Jett and Raze can, and they can also be used to get a kill and then reposition somewhere to make it really hard for players to know where you are. Shadow Step is a lot stronger of an ability than most people give it credit for, and I think the main reason that it gets such a bad rap is that most players just don't really understand the value that it can bring. We're now nearing the end of this list, and for the 9th spot, we have another ultimate, Viper's Pit. This ultimate is very powerful, arguably one of the best in the game, capable of clutching out rounds that seem unwinnable in any other situation. And even though it seems easy to use at first glance, there are still some common mistakes I see. The problem is that when most players put down Viper's Pit, they don't really put much thought into where it's being placed. Usually just right on top of the spike after it's planted. When using Viper's Pit, you kind of need to think of it like a smoke and think about which choke points you want to block with it. When ulting on defense, you want to make sure that when you put it down, that you cover the choke points that enemies need to push through so that you can hold those choke points from inside the Viper Pit. You can even place this ultimate at the start of the round just to make enemies go to the other site. Odds are when the attacking team sees a Viper ult on site, they are not going to want to push into this. On the other hand, on offense, you can use it to either create space and get your team onto a site, or to cover the bomb to make it hard for enemies to retake into it. However, the same principles still apply. When putting down the pit, you should be thinking about where enemies are going to be retaking from to force them to push through it. An example of this would be on Breeze, where enemies are going to be retaking from around the pyramids. An ult that I use is right here near the middle of the site. This blocks off enemies trying to push through either the middle of the pyramids or from the left side of the site, funneling them into my team on the right side. It's not mechanically difficult to put down a great Viper ult, but takes a little bit of forward thinking to make sure you get the most value out of it. Our final agent ability that I see used incorrectly all the time is all ultimates. I see players using every single ultimate in the game incorrectly non-stop. This might be a little extreme, but I see players waiting for the absolute perfect moment to use their ultimate, or even their normal abilities. Players will hold on to this ultimate all game, just waiting until they have the perfect moment to use their ultimate. The problem with this, though, is the opportunity cost. Opportunity cost here is the loss of potential gain. Put simply, while holding on to your ultimate, you are stopping yourself from charging it up again. So instead of spending the entire game waiting for the one perfect time to use your ultimate, you should instead find a decent time to use it and then continue to charge it up. This way you can use your ultimate multiple times throughout the game and get tons of use out of it instead of just securing one round with it. Keep this in mind with abilities also, especially when your team's economy is good. Don't die from taking a gunfight if you still have abilities that you know your team needs. Lastly, remember, if you really want to make the most out of your abilities, make sure that you are keeping up with us at SkillCapped.com. We put a lot of effort into making sure you're getting the best of the best guides, so I can honestly say that you're really missing out if you're not part of our website. Those 10 are the most common abilities that I see used incorrectly in Valorant. Hopefully this video helped you improve your gameplay some and got you thinking of some better ways to play your favorite agents. As Riot continues to add more and more agents, there will be tons more abilities that we will need to cover here, so if you think of any other mistakes, let us know in the comments. That's going to wrap us up for this one. Please drop a like on the video if it did help you, and as always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.